This is a very special episode of the Debrief and the CATO Podcast. We are at the CATO Conference and have the opportunity to sit down with Master Sergeant Earl Plumlee, who is a Congressional Medal of Honor recipient for his actions in Afghanistan. Sitting here today with Brent Stratton.
What's up, John? How are you, man? It's nice to see you.
Glad you're here, buddy.
Yeah, it's good to see you too, man. Getting to be spend a little bit of time together at the CATO Conference.
Absolutely, with a legitimate American hero.
My goodness, man, we were lucky that he came to speak with us and to our membership, and I just walked away from his presentation impressed, and we'd done a lot of research on him. I'd watched a lot of his interviews. I'd watched the citation presentation with President Biden, so I felt like I had an understanding of it, but hearing his presentation was moving, insightful, and I loved, obviously the story is compelling, but his thought process and how much he's put into dissecting and understanding what led up to that and his actions and what got him there, what made him successful, that was what was most insightful to me.
Yeah, I totally agree. We're very fortunate to have this time with Earl, and hope you all enjoy this interview.
My name is John Becker. For the past 4 decades, I've dedicated my life to protecting tactical operators. During this time, I've worked with many of the world's top law enforcement and military units. As a result, I've had the privilege of working with the amazing leaders who take teams into the world's most dangerous situations. The goal of this podcast is to share their stories in hopes of making us all better leaders, better thinkers, and better people. Welcome to the Debrief.
Earl, I appreciate you joining us today. We're excited to interview you and kind of hear your story.
No, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Why don't we start with, let's go back to the beginning. Talk to me about where your career began.
So my career began, I decided to join the military as a junior in high school. I went to the Marine recruiter who laughed at me. I thought I had discovered a glitch in the matrix. I was like, I'll just get out of here, forget high school. And turns out the military knows about that. You have to finish high school before you can join. But he said, go to the National Guard. They will let you join now if you really want to. And which was true. So I joined the National Guard as a junior in high school and had a marvelous time 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. Throughout my high school career, it was a great way it kept me out of trouble mostly, and I got to go drive a tracked vehicle or a HEMTT, which was what I was doing anyway when, off-roading and playing around, and that's what I did all of high school. But it's not what I was looking for, so as soon as I was able, I went back to the Marine Corps recruiter and signed up for the infantry because the artillery in the National Guard was too easy. But he had a harder job for me.
So how long were you in the Marine Corps?
I'd have to check exactly, but 9 years and some change.
And what was your career arc in the Marine Corps? Started in the infantry?
Yeah, I started off in the infantry. Had a great time walking around with stuff on my back, digging holes. I'm still among my friends now. I'm without peer in hole digging. They've never been professionally instructed. I have. But served in the infantry, later became a recon Marine, and ultimately, after 9 years in the Marine Corps, left and joined the Army as a 18 X-ray, which is the entrance program for selection. You go straight to selection. It's a great program if you make it. It's an interesting way to end up in the Army if you don't.
And so you obviously made it through selection. Where did you go from there?
So I went after selection. I didn't realize that the Q course is a year and a half, 2 years long, depending on the job you pick. I thought it was selection. You do this 30 days of arduous assessment, and then you're in. No, that's just to make sure that you can actually complete the training. And then I did I think a year and 4 or 5 months of the Q course, the qualification course, which was learned a lot, became a much more professional soldier. I didn't know you had to speak a foreign language as a Green Beret, and that was obviously, I'm not a deep academically, so that was the scariest part for me, having to learn and to read, write, and speak a foreign language. But they met dumber people than me. They locked me up in a room for 6 months with a very nice lady by the name of Ibu Maggie, and she taught me how to speak Indonesian.
So Indonesian was your language?
Indonesian was my language. And
By choice or by assignment?
They took a test. I got to pick some languages, and you know where you're going to get stationed. And I had a older GB. He's like, make sure your wife picks what group you work in because she's the one that's going to live there. You'll be gone the whole time.
Good marital advice.
Yeah,
That's brilliant.
So my wife picked. She wanted to live in Colorado or Washington. So I wrote down I think 2 Asian languages and 1 European language, with first group being in Washington and centered on the Indo-PACOM, and then 10th group being in Colorado, working in Europe. And we have a test that says which languages I would have a higher chance of learning to a higher ability, and that one said that is an Indonesian guy.
That's interesting. It's interesting that they have a system that can actually diagnose that.
Yeah.
So then you ended up at
1st Special Forces Group in Washington, and it's been my home ever since. I've never been stationed anywhere but inside of 1st Group. We have a Battalion 4 deployed in Japan that I served in 3 years, but I've always been in 1st Group.
which is Fort Lewis, right?
Yep.
So let's kind of walk me forward to the event. You deploy. Which theater are you in? Kind of give us the background.
We deployed to Afghanistan. We did a train up in the winter in the mountains of Washington, which really had us set up well to do a summertime deployment in Afghanistan. And was chosen to do a VSO site. It was in the city of Miri in the Ghazni province. So
I'm going to play ignorant for you because not all of our listeners are going to. We both speak, acronyms natively. I'm going to play dumb through the whole interview here and ask you to define all of the acronyms.
You just playing.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
So village stability operations, and it's a program we had where to kind of eliminate those safe spaces and also just to kind of add some backbone to the governance of the old government of Afghanistan at this point. We'd put an ODA into a village and kind of let them create a police force and then help with infrastructure projects and just keep the Taliban out of those villages. So you'd lay down ODAs and kind of sprinkle them through. Every 3 or 4 villages, you add an ODA, and the theory, which it was fairly successful, would keep them out of there. And
ODA.
Operational Detachment Alpha, which is the kind of the base maneuver element of special forces in the Army. It's 12 men. They each have a particular skill set, and they're built, for an operation like this. They go on the ground, and you don't really need to support them other than we need money, and if you want us to shoot American guns, we need American bullets. But we bought our food from the village, so we kind of prop up the economy of the village. We try to use as much of their economy as we can, and it's not top down; it's bottom up. Like we're putting the money at the bottom of this economy and using it and causing it to grow. And we plug in a lot of the programs from the State Department. Can you grow grapes instead of heroin? That would be cool. And here's a benefit to that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I don't think people realize about your unit is you are forward deployed into foreign areas and are kind of there on your own.
Yep, that's what attracted me to it. Is we go, they leave us there, and they would rather we don't ask for any help. The whole point of us is the footprint's small, the logistical strain is small, and the output is supposed to be great.
Because you're affecting it early in the system.
Yep, and we're kind of the State Department tries its best, but you have somebody deciding what is best for an area. From Kabul. When I'm there, I'm like, yeah, that's not the best for this village. They need these things, and they need a drainage ditch. They don't need you to pave anything. That's not going to help.
What's kind of cool is hearing it. This is a much more advanced version of it. And I don't mean any disrespect towards that, but it's almost similar to like a community-oriented policing model that you would see where you're working on building relationships and hoping that if you can build these relationships and going to be able to keep crime out, so to speak. So you're taking that on on a much bigger, much more macro level. But as you're saying that, I see how there's some very similar principles and philosophies associated with it there.
No, and I think it's not just like it. It's heavily nested in it. We have shuras, and we'll have everybody come out like, what do you like about the Afghan government? What do you hate about it? And then we identify these problems like, well, we hate the Afghan police. I'm like, why? And we're like, well, they set up checkpoints, and they take road tax. You're like, they take road tax. And we go to our
like
Afghan
Mexico.
police.
They rob people.
Yeah, why are you setting up basically a strong arm, road tax? People hate it. And like, well, we have to pay for our food and our fuel and our ammunition. I'm like, you have to pay for that? Why are you paying for that? And our Afghan police were taking tolls and then driving to Pakistan and buying arms and ammunition to serve as a police force. And we're writing that up like, hey, where's all the money going? Because these guys haven't been paid or supported in any way in about 8 months. And, they're like, we figured whatever the problem was, obviously some kind of graft. But, we fixed that problem, and then the people don't get taxed by their own police when they're trying to utilize, public roads, which, makes people like the police more.
Yeah, I mean, it's fixing the village from the inside.
Right.
As opposed to trying to impose a solution.
Yep.
And one that they may or may not agree with.
And that's, also we try to do all that stuff and never actively participate in the discussion. So we want these things to get solved. We may move things, pull strings, but we want them to feel like they 100% solved it. And in the end state, if we decide to leave, we want that we have left systems in place that they are solving it. And then also, let them trust their government, let them trust their police, and not always run to the nearest American soldier and like, I need this fixed.
Teaching them to fish and then letting them pick the kind of fish they want to eat, as opposed to like handing them a fish and going, here's your fish.
Unfortunately, I think we got there about 400 years too early. I have high hopes in a couple hundred years. My great-grandkids will probably be able to get that place really sorted out.
Alexander the Great had the same hopes.
So, yeah, there's a famous story of an ODA, and they ask a village, like, what do you guys need? And they're like, well, we used to have a dam here, and it was really great before the dam was destroyed. And if the dam were rebuilt, this village would really prosper. So they send the engineer sergeant out to see this blown up dam. And we're thinking that the Soviets, or maybe we blew it up during the invasion. And he goes out there and he's like, I don't know what they're talking about. There's no dam out there. It's like, you could build a dam there, but there's not one. And so we go back and, talk to these guys. And why is there was a dam? When was there a dam? Alexander the Great built the dam. Genghis Khan, as punishment for the Afghan king killing his emissaries, came in and tore everything up, and he tore the dam down, and he broke all the stones into gravel so that they couldn't remake the dam. And so that's how long they've been without a dam. And which is, when you think about it, if they just annually, sometime in the past 500 years, carried one rock out there, they'd have a dam, but they didn't. And
what an amazing perspective, though. If you think about that, I have this problem today. Oh no, it's such common sense that this problem was actually from several hundred years ago. I can't even imagine thinking that on a day-to-day basis, that the problem was actually something created that far previously.
Yeah.
There's a fantastic book called Prisoners of Geography. And the premise of the book is he looks at all the areas of the world that have had extensive conflict, Afghanistan being one of them, and why do we fight over this area? And in the case of Afghanistan, goes back before Alexander the Great and talks about, trade routes and all of these kinds of things. And it's like, many times it is a structural problem. He talks about why does India and China never fight? Because they have the Himalayas between them and it's too expensive to fight. Mm-hmm. And the chapter on Afghanistan is fascinating because of that very thing. Like, they've got a multi-year, 1,000-year relationship with their village. And in many cases we show up and we're like, hey, we can fix this in 2 weeks. They're like, no, I don't think you can.
And we don't want you to.
Yeah. And we don't like your solution.
Yeah.
So talk to me. So let's keep going forward in a timeline. So you're deployed ODA.
We're having effects, and I'm falling in love with being a Green Beret at this point. It was neat. At this point, I know I'm never going to leave a team until I absolutely can't serve anymore. I'm just loving the challenge. Every day is different. We're doing ambushes one day. We're doing medical engagements the next day. training the police, one time, how to collect evidence and not be awful. And then working with our Afghan special forces and trying to get them up on peer with us. And, I never have ADHD. So if we're going to do the same thing twice in a day, I'm going to start bashing my head against a wall. So I really loved it. The team's small. So like some problem comes in and like, that's your problem, go fix it. And as a young, E6, that was kind of heady stuff. They're like, hey, go solve this problem. I'm busy. And here's what you get $50,000, and a truck, solve it. And I just loved it.
That's fantastic. So keep walking forward to the event.
I'm doing great. And then, my Sergeant Major, Tony Bell, flies into the camp and he's looking for me. And, normally you don't want the company Sergeant Major looking for you. But at this point, I know that my performance has just been exemplary and I'm doing great work. So I'm like, not afraid. Whatever he's about to tell me, it's going to be a good job on something. I just don't know what. And it was terrible news. He's telling me that they're closing our site. It was very successful. And that I could go home early or I could come work for him in the company headquarters. And, no Green Beret goes to selection to do either of those things. So, I'm like crestfallen. Those are two like equally crappy things for me. But, I decided that working at the company headquarters is still deployed work. It's still in support of this war, and going home is not. And so I chose to work for him, and left Miri and moved to FOB Ghazni, where I supported the company headquarters as the weapons sergeant, and started my 9 to 5, if you will. It wasn't a 9 to 5. It was about a 5 to 10 at night.
Work till you're exhausted, go to sleep till you can't sleep anymore.
Yeah. So, like one of my first things is we had, I think, 60,000 pounds of fragmentation producing munitions stored near the living area and the company headquarters because the FOB had just grown, but the ammunition plan had not changed. And I was like, well, you generally don't want to sleep next to bombs. At least I don't. But everybody has a job on the AOB, so I had to move it myself, or I had one other soldier help me. So every day we would get up about 4 a.m. and start carting this stuff off and put it in a different area. But every day was some challenge like that, where not the most interesting work in the world. A lot of it was backbreaking labor or mind-numbing paperwork. Like I calculated ammunition consumption for all the ODAs and projected what we would need to order in the future, which is nobody wants to do that.
I'm going to say that was probably not part of selection.
No, they did not have that. Nobody said, hey, at one point you're going to get to do this, forecast ammunition. And if you get it wrong, people are not going to have ammo and they're going to hate your guts. And I'm like, oh, okay.
So give me, kind of describe the FOB for me. Like how big is it? How many people?
So, I don't know how big. It's not how many people are there, but I think it was 2,000 meters by 1,000 meters, and I think it is roughly, it's got straight lines, but think a jelly bean. It was a Polish camp. The ODB had probably 40, 50 people on it, and then we had 2 teams that were living connected to our camp. So we had a very small SF footprint on the camp, as that's how we work anyway. And I think there was a Polish, but a couple thousand Poles, and it was it was a hub because we'd won the war in 2013. A lot of people forgot that we won once already, but we were winning and leaving, and it was kind of the first larger FOB where you could actually ditch equipment as your unit was retrograding out of the country. So huge logistical hub for that area of Afghanistan, and for a unit that's leaving, it's the first place. Equipment that's not actually yours, you only need it for Afghanistan. It's the first place you could find somebody to sign for it so you could leave. And it's also in the city of Ghazni is kind of a big deal in Afghanistan. It's part of the old trade routes. It used to be a huge city, and had some religious significance. If you can't afford to Hajj to Mecca, you're allowed to do some form of worship in Ghazni and get partial credit. But what kind of got us in a bind was we generally don't tell anybody when we're closing a camp, because the Taliban developed a really neat, easy win for them. So if we say we're closing a camp, they'll come in and attack it very near to the end. So then they get to take credit for running us out of that area. So unfortunately, they figured out that we were closing Ghazni and selected us for a complex attack, so they could kind of claim credit for shutting it down and running us out. And then also they, I mean, rightfully so, if they were able to inflict the kind of casualties they were hoping for, can kind of dictate foreign policy. Or the U.S.'s swag at it. You figure if you killed a couple hundred American soldiers, like that would be front page news. Everybody would be like, what is going on? And let's get out of there. Everybody, kind of had lost their taste for the Afghan war anyway. So that's what they were hoping for. At the low end, kind of make the Afghan people think that they're driving us out. At the high end, affect, America's foreign policy. But we didn't know that. I'm just on the ground carting ammo around and eating chow and lifting weights and hoping that some weapon sergeant somewhere sprains his ankle and I can go take his place. And we always got indirect fire. And I look back on all the precursors, if we really paid attention, but we were too busy. And the AOB, by its nature, is a support mechanism. It's not a kinetic operation. The Poles owned all the land around us, which kind of kept us disjointed. But we were, watching the frequency of the indirect fire attacks on the camp come up to the point where, I didn't leave the camp between 10 and 12 o'clock because the worst case scenario is there'd be an indirect fire attack on the camp, and I would get trapped because the whole camp shuts down, and you have the regular army out there, strictly imposing all these processes they have, and if like I'm trying to get work done, I'm trapped across the camp until they open it, and they won't open it until EOD inspects each of these rounds, and it's so if I'm going to get trapped somewhere, I get trapped on the SF compound where at least I can get a task completed. But it went from being a intermittent thing to a weekly thing to a daily thing, and we're thinking even then I remember like the big win is that they're closing the camp for an hour to 2 hours every time they do this, and it's just a harassment thing. But what they were doing was conditioning the camp. Every day you need to go sit in your bunker. This is normal. Also mapping out where all these soldiers are seeking cover, and also refining where these rounds are landing so that when they launch their big attack, they can hit key infrastructure on the camp, which they did. So the first volley of indirect fire after the initial breach hit the camp generators, and somebody decided that to park the spare or alternate generator right next to the primary to make maintenance easy. But when one burned, it burned the other. So we lived without electricity for kind of a while.
So you think initially, as they're doing this, they're basically scouting and training.
Yes, looking back on it, we kind of went after it, and we know that they're assessing, scouting. Each of the guys that assaulted the camp had a little card that was hand drawn, but amazingly accurate. Like even I don't read the Pashto, but I picked it up and I recognize everything on the camp. I can point to each structure and tell you what it is because it's drawn so well.
Now, do they have people inside the camp also?
Yeah, so we had, even on the Polish FOB, they have a program where they hire Afghan laborers to do different tasks and perform things. And the Taliban just went and either coerced, recruited, or just caused their own people to be hired. And had those guys all over the camp. And, we recovered, I think, 5 suicide vests that had been hidden on the camp. Somebody put them on and sweat in them. And then for whatever reason, they didn't receive the signal or see the thing that would cause them to conduct their attack, and they took them off and then just went and rejoined that workforce, which caused everybody to be, nervous wreck because that guy's still here. And is there any more suicide vests buried on the camp somewhere? Yeah,
I mean, so they're basically they're building towards an attack objective and gradually getting more accurate maps, figuring out their fire, figuring out your patterns, figuring out where everything that's critical is, so that when they do kick off the attack, it's all at once.
And they, and it was bigger than that because they'd launched some attacks throughout the entire country, and they're getting the critiques and ARs, after action review, and like, oh, what is successful and what is not. So one of the first attacks, they detonated the bomb, and then the guys had to drive down from a safe place, and the lapse between the vehicle-borne explosive device and the little assaulters was too long. So the camp had kind of shrugged off the bomb and was waiting for them and killed them all immediately. And then a second attack, they got much closer, dressed up as Americans. But if you've ever watched any of the Stolen Valor videos, man, if you put your tie clip on wrong, there's a Marine out there somewhere that'll spot it from 200 meters. So nobody was fooled that these guys were American soldiers because they had AK-47s, but their uniforms were wrong and slovenly. So those guys were all instantly neutralized without penetrating the camp very far. So they're like, okay, here's what we're going to do. They staged in a structure very near the camp, dressed up as Afghan army, which worked because when I first saw them, I was like, these guys, I'm a Green Beret. I'm going to put these guys to work. This is my job. Why are they over here anyway? And then they identified themselves as not Afghan army by shooting at me.
Which is a pretty clear message. Yeah.
Yeah, it's in the intelligence community. We call it an indicator.
Yeah.
It's a clue.
Yeah. Police work, you call it a clue. Yeah.
You made a great detective, Earl.
So how does talk to me the morning of the event? What happens?
So the morning of the event, and one of the reasons I was able to respond as quickly as I had is we, I always make fun of young Earl. He's a real knucklehead, and I pick on him all the time. But we took a picture for the deployment on the AOB, and we're having a change of command, and I went full bore for the picture. I wanted to look amazing, So I had all my equipment, had all my ammunition looking good. My rifle's cleaned up. I have my my sniper rifle, and I took a great photo right before the attack. And I get distracted. So instead of taking my equipment back and putting it up in my room, I went to hang out with a buddy of mine in the med shed and set all that stuff just outside instead of putting it up like a true professional. But it worked out for me. And we're hanging out. Like I said, both of us are kind of bummed out that we're on the AOB, and we can't wait to not be on the AOB. And suddenly we're both on the floor of the med shed, covered in everything that was on his shelves because a 3,500 to 5,000 pound bomb is just detonated about 700 meters from where we're at.
Where did they actually detonate the bomb? Was it the gate or?
Oh, that's what kind of clued me in immediately that this was going to be different because that is a very common attack. They'll drive a truck bomb or a vehicle bomb into a gate and try to kill the sentries working there. But this one was on a far end of the camp that's not habitated, and we had a flight line on it. And this is about midway down the flight line. There's a long section of this HESCO wall, and they detonated the bomb back there. And the chances of them, killing anybody are, extremely low. I think there was one guy running down the flight line who lived apparently. I saw him on a video. But somebody said they knew him and were talking to him. He didn't remember his name for a couple days, but because he was about 200 meters from, this 1,000-pound, multi-1,000-pound bomb, and you can see him just get launched off he's out there running, obviously at the end of his run, kind of going all in, and you just see him get launched like a rag doll off the running trail.
So they basically used a 5,000-pound breaching charge.
It's I would say flashbang would be more apt. They needed a hole in the wall, which a much smaller device would have built they cleared out 60 meters of 11-foot HESCO wall and left a 20-foot crater under it. It was overkill. A couple 100 pounds would have made what they needed. So I think it was mostly to shock the camp, and also they either by accident or by design, all the alarms go off. Everybody runs to their bunkers. And, those first few rounds came in and killed the power to the camp. So the camp had, two conditions for attack. FOBCom red, we're getting attacked. Everybody, hit your bunkers and get in there. And then FOBCom black means everybody come out and fight for your life because the camp's been penetrated. It's possibly it's being overrun. And the Polish command was not able to communicate that down to the guys in the bunkers. So they're riding this attack out in the bunkers. And unbeknownst to them, there's 15 guys wearing suicide vests, sprinting across the airfield, coming to a bunker near you, And up until now, their plan's going perfectly, working out really great.
Yeah, because they've created their diversion, they've breached the wall, and now the 15 guys are coming in through that opening.
Mm-hmm. And at this time, I'm hearing they had a base of fire set up, which is to machine guns that aren't going to penetrate the camp, but it's to provide suppressing fire, so these guys can worry more about movement than about engaging U.S. forces or Polish forces. And I could hear that, and I was kind of figuring out what we were facing, and jumped in my stuff and started looking for a way to get over to the other side of the camp, which we had a mail clerk out picking up the company's mail, and he was not excited about being out during this. And then as he was coming back on 180 degrees from where this bomb's detonated, we had a hotel that had a good amount of foreign fighters, Afghan fighters, and about 160 of them. Also with machine guns, RPGs, recoilless rifles, and mortars. And, after the bomb detonated, nobody's really moving except for him. And they wanted something to shoot at, and he was the guy. So he was super pumped not to be out there anymore.
So the 160, they're friendlies, or they're
No, this is the attack was going great until then, but we surmised that they meant to penetrate the camp on at least 3 sides. And there's probably more fighters, but these guys are sitting in this hotel, just firing into the camp. And there was another truck, a 20,000-pound charge, and the fuel pump went out, and the driver just got out and walked away. But it broke down, I think, less than a mile from the camp. So we're kind of thinking those guys were supposed to create space at the gate, because these guys are firing directly into the front gate. This truck's supposed to pull in as far into the camp as he can and detonate, and then these guys will leave the hotel and kind of hit the camp.
Got it.
But that didn't happen. They, didn't do proper maintenance on their vehicles, so they
their whole operation was ruined by a fuel pump.
Right. Yeah.
Fortunately.
Yeah. Fortunately, because as I tell the story, I'm like, if they'd had one more Girl Scout, I'd have been in trouble, because I was down to my pocket knife by the time it was over. But anyway, that's, I'm not unaware at this, other than, we get into a truck, me and my 2 buddies, and we pull out of the camp, and I'm like, well, I'm in charge of the security for the SF camp. I've already decided I'm going to go get in a fight, but I'm going to lock this gate, because we had a big gate, and I'm like, you guys pull through, I'll lock this gate. And, that's going to be at least I didn't leave the gate unlocked and somebody just ran in here. Until these guys mount the towers, because I can kind of see the AOB shaking it off, and everybody's doing what they're supposed to. Anyway, the truck parks out on the street, and they start taking fire. And I slip through a little foot gate, and by the time I get to the truck, Drew and Nate are pretty excited that we need to go somewhere else.
Yeah, they're taking fire and they're ready to leave.
I'm locking the gate up and putting my locks on and making sure my shoes are tied tight, and they're out there, rounds bouncing off the truck and are like, look, where is he?
Yeah. Cursing you, screaming at you, honking the horn.
Yeah, I probably almost got left. But, we hop on the truck, and, we start pulling away from the camp, and we're pulling past our motor pool, and it's catching hell. And we're thinking, well, maybe we'll go help those guys. But, we can see them. Everybody's running around pretty animated, and the guard towers are starting to return fire. And I'm like, they got it. We'll head for the breach. And, we start moving toward the breach, and that's when my company warrant and then a medic from one of the other teams, Matt Horde and Mark Colbert, pull up. They're on a 4-wheeler, giving us, thumbs up and pointing toward the blast. And we're giving them a thumbs up, and we're going there too. Let's get after it. And we, headed down there together. And it started off with us in the front, and I kind of get to the airfield, and we start slowing down. I'm kind of thinking about dismounting at this point. And as they pull past us, they start catching hell. I could see them getting hit, and I could see rounds impacting around them. At this point, though, I thought it was the base of fire, honestly. I could see that they were catching a lot of small arms fire, and I just thought it was from the base of fire that I could hear from just off the camp. Because at this point, I'm still down this little lane, and I haven't come out onto the airfield to really see the whole thing yet. I can just see them, catching a ton of fire.
So at this point, you think it's still external fire?
Because
not internal fire.
Not internal, because we got there so fast. I just couldn't. I was like, we must have beat them before they got here, because there's still smoke in the air, and we raced down there in this truck, and the Taliban didn't give me their plan, so I was unaware of what they were doing, which was rude. But
that's okay.
But
You'll get them back.
They stacked really close to this thing. I don't know where, or it must have been a bumpy ride for them, because they were already 200 meters into the camp by the time I get there. And anyway, we pull around to block these guys from the fire, and then I see the Afghans, and I have that split second thought, like, wow, these idiots are facing the wrong way and they're running away. The bad guys are over here. I'm gonna jump out here and put them to work, and that's they turned inboard and identified themselves as the enemy by firing at me, which got everybody stressed out in the truck again.
They would subsequently learn to regret that decision, though. So,
well, maybe I never got to talk to them, but I have my sniper rifle, and I'm kind of banging it on everything in the truck, trying to get the dangerous in toward the bad guys, and I present it out and fire one round and it jams. I think I had a SCAR variant. It's got an external charging handle. I think that the charging handle must have caught on the door frame, because it's like one of the most reliable rifles ever. That thing never jammed before, never jammed since. But for this story, it jammed, which was a huge letdown for me. So I decided, I know I got Drew and Nate with me. They still got a couple plays to make, so I'm going to create space for them. And I pull my pistol, and I'm a pretty good shot, but I'm better the closer I get. So I just started closing with the nearest group of fighters and engaging them with my pistol as best I can. And
describe the battle space for me. How far are you from them? How are they set up?
They're set up.
How many are there?
There's, I think back, I don't think all 15 of them were there. I think there's probably 9, maybe 12 were there. But they were in a semicircle around us, so they were all the way. The trucks kind of started the turn. There's guys all the way out to the left shooting into the driver's window, and they come all the way around to my front and slightly to my rear, shooting into my window.
So they were spread out, closing towards you guys when you encounter them.
So they had this particular lane was the only way to access the main thoroughfare through the camp off the airfield, and they had it marked on their little cards. So we didn't know what they were trying to do until later, which they had to get past us to meet their intent. They had to get past us and get down this lane, because right behind us down this little lane is all the bunkers where all the soldiers who are seeking cover from this indirect fire. They're all in these little bunkers that are set up and down this street. And as best we can tell, they all had 20 hand grenades, a lot of 40 millimeter grenades for their underbarreled grenade launchers, and about 20 rifle magazines, which is kind of a lot in Taliban equipping. And we figured they're supposed to hit these bunkers, throw grenades in them, shoot grenades in them, and then ultimately, obviously detonate their suicide vest at some point, and kind of work down these. And everybody has a different guess of how that would have worked out, but it would have been fairly successful, I think. Especially, a lone guy, somebody probably would have killed him, but operating in a team like that, they'd be able to suppress a target and have a guy sprint and run and dive into the bunker, which was a tactic they later used on me. But at this point, I dismount with my pistol. I start engaging as best I can. I think they had a plan that if somebody got wounded, they would detonate their vest. Because I I put 2 rounds in this guy's rifle, and he kind of came off of his gun. And then we do a training. If somebody's wearing a vest, I didn't know it was a suicide vest, but we go for the pelvic girdle, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing this wrong. And I dropped down to his pelvis and fired around and turned the strings off. The doll dropped. And also I'm super close to him now, and they haven't hit me yet, and I'm obviously getting effects as I transition back and forth to each of these guys. And
give me distance. Like what do you think you're?
The nearest guy was probably 7 meters, and the furthest was probably 15. So we're right. I can tell that they washed today because I don't smell too much BO.
That's close. That's pretty close.
And close enough. I remember seeing expressions. I know when I got a hit because I'm looking at this guy's face, and I can see that what I just did hurt. And I remember being agitated, frustrated, and so we're close. And but now I've covered that distance, and I honestly didn't think I was going to make it that far. So I didn't have a great after plan. So I was kind of like, holy shit, what the hell had just happened? How did they not hit me? And obviously, Nate and Drew have a different version of this because as I was, running around with my pistol, they were both getting hit with everything that missed me. So they're fairly frustrated and don't understand why that happened either. But I never thought I would actually close that full distance. I was just trying to have as good effects as I could because I was just waiting to get hit, to be honest with you. And once I got up there, I was like, well, I guess I need a plan B now. And
here we are. Now what? And
I grabbed a lot of stuff, but I didn't grab my gun belt. So I was carrying a concealed pistol, and I only had 1 magazine for it. And I call it my combat purse. I have a purse, and I keep lots of hand grenades and spare mags in it. But when I jumped out of the truck, it's in the floorboard of the truck, which I didn't bring the truck with me, so now I didn't have that. But I had a hand grenade. It's the next best thing I had on my vest, so I pulled that out and popped the spoon and tossed it, and just blind luck, I hit that fighter I'd hit in the hips, and he's just laying there still. And everybody, all the guys behind him saw that grenade and just got way much further away, which was the plan. That's what people do when you get hand grenades out. They go somewhere else.
So they basically turn and run away.
Yep. They all, which was great for me because I needed a little bit of time to figure some stuff out.
And get some bullets
Yeah. Get a gun. I need a gun.
Yeah. Any gun.
But I went to work on my rifle. We have the drill, and I locked the bolt to the rear and stripped that magazine out and did my 3 little piggies, and the rounds fell out right away. Thankfully, it wasn't a bad jam, or I probably wouldn't have made it again. And then put a fresh mag in and was back in the fight. And the grenade detonated, which is the guy did have a suicide vest on. His is the only vest that didn't detonate. Is the guy I killed with a hand grenade. Just one of those weird.
The one guy that was actually exposed to an explosive device, his vest
didn't detonate. Yeah, because everybody else we were shooting, their vests were detonating, and I was like, how did the grenade guy not blow up? Yeah. But it did kill him, so we didn't have to worry about him anymore. And then I'm sitting there, going, you don't see that every day, and I start hearing pop pop pop, and I can hear thump 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 behind me, and I remember. Ever since I was a recon Marine, I hate, I sound like Anakin, but I hate sand. And there's sand running down the back of my neck, and I look off and I can see, to my rear and left, there's a guy in the prone with a sling supported prone position, just laying them in on me, and he's going for a headshot at like 100 meters, and he just had a bad zero and threw like 5 rounds into the wall, just not in me. And I knew exactly. I have a 100-meter zero on my gun. This guy is at like 100 meters because it's where we do our wind sprints for PT in the morning. So I dropped to a knee and I held on the notch of his throat and pulled the trigger, and he instantly vaporized off the earth. He was gone, which. surprised me. I was not ready for that.
Yeah, you're expecting him to be shot.
Yeah.
And I guess his vest detonates.
It's it took me a minute because we had Polish tanks, so I thought maybe a tank had come up and just decided to crush this one dude with the gun.
Yeah.
But I started looking around and they're not there, and it dawned on me that I had hit a suicide vest with a sniper rifle, and great, I have bucket list is complete. I've now done every sniper's dream shot.
Shot a guy in a suicide vest and detonated the vest.
Yeah, recommend it. Doing that much further away if you can. 100 meters is still kind of close. Whatever their vests were made of, I think the other thing is that they had a very hot explosive in it with not enough shrapnel. So, later as I get exposed to these vests, it was painful, but I never got hit by any fragmentation of any substance other than one piece of brass from an AK got blown out of a vest and hit my arm, but it didn't. Unless I get a bad sunburn, there's not even a scar.
Amazing. So, okay,
Drew has an opposite story. So he caught every piece of frag on the battlefield, ruined a couple tattoos. So that's my side. His got a different story.
Everybody's got a different perspective on how things unfold.
He's like, they were great vests. Every time one went off, I got hit with something. But at this point, I can hear everybody kind of screaming behind me. I'm at this corner, so I don't want to go back to where they're at because these guys will just be right on top of us. And I'm not going to – I didn't know that they were just down there waiting for me. I thought maybe they were trying to run down to the airfield where the aircraft are stored and start destroying aircraft. So I'm going to go after them, and I'll stay engaged as far away as I can is my rough plan. And I know whoever is not out of the fight, they're coming and they're going to hear me. I'm throwing grenades and I'm shooting my rifle. The rest of the guys I came with are going to get down here any minute.
Cavalry's on the way. So I start moving down that lane, and I get about halfway down it, and about 5 guys hang muzzles out and start shooting at me, and I start returning fire, and at this point, the furthest one, we're talking maybe 20 meters, nearest probably 15. But really close if you have a 5x25 scope. So I'm luckily I had a red dot on it on a 45 offset, so I'm trying to use that. And I'm shooting at them, and every time I put my rifle, they're doing whack-a-mole stuff, so they'll pull back, and somebody else is shooting at me. So I'm trying to transition back and forth. And so they're ducking behind cover.
Oh yeah, they were using cover well, and even the guys who were exposing, they're using the Sealand containers and the Humvees and the boxes. They're using it really nicely. Really only giving me half of their face, mostly their rifle, and not big targets to engage. And there's more of them than me. So every time I point a gun at somebody, he'll just duck behind, and then somebody else will take a couple of shots at me.
Are you in the open at this point?
I'm in the open. I'm in my mind, I'm slowly walking, but due to using mostly adrenaline and very little red blood cells, I was probably sprinting or jogging. But I remember still working through this problem, trying to keep moving because I can see this junction panel, and that's my goal. Is I'm going to fight to this junction panel, get behind it, and have cover. And but anyway, I'm most of the way to that junction panel, and my rifle ran dry. I just tried to do a speed reload right there in the middle of them. Not optimal, but my pistol is empty and my grenades are gone. And anyway, as soon as I dumped that magazine, the nearest fighter to me slung his rifle, sprinted toward me. The classic screamed "Al Akbar." And at this point, I know what's going down, but well practiced. I don't really have to think about this. I got the gun reloaded. Felt like he was hanging off the end of the muzzle, but he was probably 7-10 meters away, and fired a few rounds and struck his vest and detonated it. And I think the junction panel ate most of the frag. The blast, kind of blew me out from behind there, off to my side. And I wasn't out. confused. I was trying to figure out. I was very comfortable for whatever reason, but I just remember kind of laying there, and I was like, "Why is there so much gravel in my bed?" And you can hear that, pop, pop, pop of rifle fire. And there's another fighter has left cover, and he's looking over his sights. He's got his gun like super low in his chest, and he's just looking, right at my face, firing his rifle, and all his rounds are landing about a foot low, because he wanted to take it all in, I guess.
He was watching himself be successful.
Yeah. And anyway, I jerked my rifle up and just hammered away at him, and folded him up. He's the same distance. He's probably at that 10 to 12 meter line. And I must have hit him, 5 or 6 times, because I was really getting after it, being aggressive on the trigger.
Yeah. He's closing on you.
Yeah.
You're trying to make him stop closing on you.
It was an emotional event for both of us. And I get back to my feet and go back to that whack-a-mole thing I'm doing, just shooting at everybody that's got a head on their shoulders. When I ran out of ammo again. And so this time I'm like, I'm not gonna do the race again. That was lame. So I dump my magazine as I simultaneously turn off and sprint back to my the corner where I dismounted the truck, and get reloaded about the same time. I'm kind of dashing around this corner, and crash into Drew Busick, who's been in the back seat getting shot, bleeding all over the mail for the entire company. Everybody was pretty bummed out. My mom sent cookies, and you bled all over him. Thanks. But he's had his own struggle. Like one of the rounds came through and hit the child safety locks on the truck door. So he was climbing through all this mail, and he's trying to get this truck door open, and it's not going to happen. Oh
God! So he's trapped in the back of the car with the child safety locks.
Yeah, and then Nate.
That's literally like a bad dream.
Yeah. And Nate's driving. He got hit, and we call it the nuclear karate chop. He got hit, and he had a stainless steel windlass on a tourniquet that he had up on his the collar of his gear, and a round has hit it, and he thought he got shot through the neck. So when I dismounted the vehicle, he jammed the truck into reverse and did a reverse 180 out of there. So when Drew finally got out of the truck, I guess he was confused about which way is this truck facing now.
Because he had done the cool James Rockford J turn. Yeah.
But Drew, he saw me run down that alley, so he came running for me. Nate left the vehicle. They got super lucky on their shot placement for killing the truck. They shot the battery terminals and the alternator, so the truck was
and the child safety lock.
And the child safety lock.
3 for 3.
Yeah. Missed me. At this point, Nate's still in pretty good shape. I think Drew caught 3 or 4 rounds, but most of them hit a truck door, a truck seat, so they came through as more like Chinese throwing stars. So it really looked like he just got in a knife fight. It's not that bad. He'll disagree because he's had some very nice tattoos that are ruined at this point, so he's pretty upset about it.
I think it's reasonable to be.
Yeah, nobody wants to put in all that time and effort, and then now it's just this weird flayed open thing.
Well, and plus nobody wants to get hit with frag.
Oh yeah, that's
rounds. True.
Yeah. But he saw me run down the alley, so he's coming. Like I thought, like I knew he would. Somebody's coming, and we crashed into each other, and I was like, "Hey, I know where they're at. Let's go get them." And he's like, "Yeah, let's go get them." So we at this time now it's 2 people. That's a team. We're doing some teamwork. He's on the far left of the lane. I'm on the far right. We're moving down. Nobody's really shooting at us, but it's indirect fire still landing on the camp. This base of fire is still shooting. So I don't mean to make it sound like it was a peaceful walk. It's still, if Spielberg was filming, we got plenty of stuff going on to make it exciting. And he's looking like he's going to step over this last guy I shot, and this guy is like smoking. Like, there's a little bit of smoke coming off of him. And I remember telling Drew, I was like, stay away from the bodies. They have suicide vests on. And I remember it kind of stopped him in his tracks, and he turned back, and he's like, what? I was like, everybody has a suicide vest, so, keep your distance. Be forewarned.
Yeah.
Which, he's kind of paused there. I'm kind of edging toward this damn junction panel again. It's the only cover in this little lane. Everything else is a open thoroughfare, and it's all these sea-lane containers. So there's nothing really to hide behind.
You say junction panel, you mean like an electrical box?
It's a gigantic electrical box. It's where all the big like 2-inch cable from the generators comes in here and it gets dispersed out.
Got it. How big is this?
It's probably 2.5 feet wide and 3 feet tall, 4 feet tall. It's almost big enough for two people to hide behind, which comes up in a minute.
Which probably at this point looks to you like
it's better than like
a castle.
Yeah. Pretty funny the rounds that had come through it because it wouldn't stop a bullet, but it would hit those big heavy cables, and since they were aiming at me, it would turn the bullet like 30, 40 degrees. So if they had just sprayed blindly, they probably would have got me, but they were actually aiming at the panel trying to hit me, and it would just turn just enough to go around me and come through the back of the panel, which is kind of marvelous. It's one of those weird things.
I mean, this whole event is you literally couldn't script even up till now and have anybody believe this actually occurred. No,
not at all. I think the only reason anybody even remotely believed this was it happened on base. So when they came back to investigate it, they did CSI. Like, you said you were shooting here. Let's see. And yep, there's a pile of brass there. And I actually was doing a walkthrough I was on drugs for pain. So it was either General McConville or Secretary of Defense Esper. But I was kneeling down. I was like, and then I got my grenade out and threw it right here and found my grenade pin.
Wow.
So I was like, oh, shit, I was right here, actually. And he's like, well, I mean, yeah, I guess you were right here. Anyway, Drew is sitting there, and this vest goes low order. So it's like a blowtorch, like a gigantic blowtorch. It's like 20 feet of flame and, overwhelming heat. Like it went from being, spicy back there to just like you opened a oven door and you're looking in at it.
So if Drew had stepped over him, he would have probably been extra crispy.
It wouldn't have done him any good.
Yeah.
Anyway, Drew hates things like that, so he came over to join me behind the junction panel, and either the guy's grenades started detonating, or everybody just started throwing grenades just because. But either way, we start doing the whack-a-mole stuff again, me and Drew, and everything was exploding. We watched the video of it. We're trying to count at least 15, probably more, like 20, 25 grenades, because you can just see them rapidly exploding in this area, and stuff's flying out of the alley. And Drew and I are having this little chubbing fight where I want to get all the way behind the panel so I can shoot behind it, and he hates that because every time I dig my hips in, I'm kicking him out the other side of it. And then, likewise, he'll jump back in and kind of push me over to the edge of it. And I dislike that intensely. So we're kind of, sharing this thing like two brothers would, share something not well. And at that time, I that's when I get like hit in the base of my throat with a large, heavy device. And I'm kind of, choked up over this junction panel, and I have we call it an admin pouch. It's just a big, bulky pouch, and you can keep like a notebook and a gel shot and a candy bar, things you need in combat. And anyway, I look down at mine, and it's got a grenade wedged against it, and which it's not my grenade, and it doesn't have a pin, so it's amps the stress level up for me and Drew. Well, for me, Drew, I don't think noticed it. But for me, it was a traumatic event. I, whacked that thing away from me, and then while I'm messing with that, something hit me in the back of the leg, and it's another grenade. I figure it hit the wall behind me and then just ricocheted off and hit me. And Drew and I are both trying to kick that thing out of there because it's in the same configuration. It's not ours, and it doesn't have a pin, so we don't want it. And we get it out of there, and Drew, grabs me. He's like, "Hey, we got to get out of here. They're going to kill us." And he's a pretty smart guy, I think. So I tend to go with what he says. And we take off running out of there. And I think we get 3 or 4 steps away from that panel, and we both just get kind of knocked down by an explosion. And I remember like he's trying to get up, and I'm kind of laying on his leg, and I'm messing with my gun because I can't get my stock into my shoulder, and I can't get on my feet because he won't stop yanking on me. And that's when I looked down and I can't figure out what's wrong with my rifle. My buttstock's folded over, and there's about an arm from just below the elbow down has smacked into my rifle and broke the buttstock off, or not off, but broke it and folded it. And
you say an arm, you mean like literally physically somebody's arm?
Yep, just somebody's arm. So, and I think he might have reached across his vest and detonated his vest and then sent an arm missile at me, or maybe it was just laying out there because after the battle there was body parts everywhere, like you find when a bunch of guys get together and detonate suicide vests. That's all that's left is the extremities mostly.
Pieces, yeah.
But
so the blast that knocks you down is him setting off his suicide vest.
Well, probably it could have been a grenade. Also, maybe there was an arm on the ground and the grenade just, who knows. But there was stuff exploding, a lot of it. And anyway, we get up. Drew helps me to my feet, and we end up back around this corner again, and that's where we see Mark Colbert because I remember seeing him falling. I haven't seen him at this point. I haven't even heard him, and he's he's usually the guy that would be driving it. I'm trying to figure out where. Like I'm thinking that he's either dead or grievously wounded, which I guess he was grievously wounded. He got shot through the butt. He says it was the upper thigh, but I was in the hospital when he got treated. It's definitely butt meat, and which hurts. But I guess he and Nate had got Matt Horde, who was driving the 4-wheeler. They've been spending this whole time getting him patched up and off the battlefield. So he got shot through the calf and in the forehead, but it hit the lip of his helmet and stopped it. But he is not useful because he.
Yeah, when an AK round hits a ballistic helmet that's not designed to stop an AK round, it does tend to pass some kinetic energy through.
Yeah, that's what he said. So he was pretty confused for a day or two. But anyway, I'm pumped to see Chief Colbert. He was from my team. He was on the AOB with me, and he was one of the guys that kind of mentored me directly on my team. He's a GB I aspire to be, and he was a part of my team leadership. And I was very thankful he wasn't dead. And he's kind of a character, so he's like, what? He's kind of a gruff guy, and he's like, what the hell are you guys doing? Do the same spiel again, like, Chief, we know right where they're at. They're right down here. Let's go get them. And he's like, yeah, well, hell, let's go get them. And he starts limping up from his, ostensibly upper thigh injury. I never seen anybody walk like that with a thigh injury. But, he waddles around, stacks up, and I'm about to lead us down. Drew's taking that far left again. I'm on this corner. You can't have a good war story without a Navy SEAL. So we had one Navy SEAL showed up. It was a Lieutenant Turnipseed. He's stacked up with Drew. And I'm trying to reload my rifle. If you hear, I keep running out of ammo, and it's always been a stressful thing for me. So I'm like, I'm going to reload before we go around the corner. And I can't find a magazine. I look down, and my vest is empty. There's no more magazines. And I was like, well, I better check to see what I'm dealing with here. And I pull my magazine out, and it's got one round on the feed lip there, which sounds bad. It's not that bad because I have one in the chamber. So I've got twice as many as I thought I had. So I have two.
So you have the double Andy Griffith special.
Yeah,
2 bullets.
But they're not any bullets. They're sniper bullets. So
there, okay, yeah. Problem solved.
Yeah, problem solved. But I'm like, I probably shouldn't walk point. So I yelled, "Hey, Chief, I can't go first. I'm out of ammo. You got to go first." And which confuses him. He's like, "Huh? What the hell are you talking about?" I was like, "I only got one bullet. You have to go first. You take point, but don't worry, I'll cover you." And he's like, I'm already shot, so I can go point and get shot more. That's your plan? I was like, well, yeah, you go first and get shot more. But yeah, he rolls in front of me, and we start to kind of push down this alley. It's at this time that a soldier from the 10th Mountain, Mike Ollis, he has run all the way across the camp. He's heard this gunfight the whole time. I guess he was in the MWR with his guys. Didn't have any equipment. He just had his rifle and 130-round mag and a can-do attitude. But he's run about 1,100 meters, I think. And he sees us kind of easing into this alley, and he's like, "Can I go with you?" And we're like, "Yeah, come on if you want to come. This is the place."
So we got 32 bullets.
No, we got 32 bullets. Yeah. And anyway, we ease down this alley. We get to the end of it. Same thing. Pretty peaceful at this point. It's better than it has been. Nobody's throwing grenades at us, and nobody's really like shooting directly at us. The camp is still, you can hear stuff blowing up, and you can hear everybody on the camp shooting everywhere. But in our little spot, it's not bad. And Chief is looking down. There's body parts everywhere, and stuff's on fire. The UAV compound had I think like 500 gallon of aviation fuel for the drones, and it has been burning this entire time. And anyway, he's like, "I think you guys got them all," and we hadn't, because somebody heard that, must have spoke English, decided to make a funny little dig on Chief, but bounced past 2 hand grenades at us and yanked the lanyard on his vest and detonated his vest, which scattered everybody. Everybody wanted to be somewhere else, and I remember like thinking, "Why is everybody running?" Been through way worse than this, and one of the grenades actually came dumped over near me, and I'm back almost to the generator panel again. It's my spot. It's my favorite hangout, and I'm like, I'll ride this thing out. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, remember, I'm like, I don't have iPro on. I probably shouldn't look at it when it goes off. So I remember turning my head.
Safety first.
Safety first, yeah.
Yeah. When you're going to stand by a grenade,
don't look at it.
Important safety tip: wear eye protection.
Right. Which is just at this point not thinking completely clear and figuring out what's really going on in the world. But it detonated, and it hurt. I remember it like in my bones it hurt. But nothing hit me, and man, I guess I was right about that one.
That's a win.
But I start hearing fire again from behind us. We didn't know this is the last fighter. Has run all the way around. He's shooting the guys up in the back of this thing. I guess he hit Mike, and he hit this Polish lieutenant. His name escapes me at the moment. But they're both catching hell and returning fire. I fire my last 2 bullets, and Drew fired a few rounds at him. And either we hit his vest and detonated him, or we hit him and then he has detonated his vest. Either way, his vest detonates, and it blew Mike Ollis from where he was, kind of toward the end of the lane where we started, most of the distance to me.
How far do you think that is?
It probably blew him probably 10 meters. And he was right, choked up against this guy, so he pretty much tamped that charge. And at this point, I have no ammunition. I got my pocket knife out, and I'm kind of dancing around with this knife. And it occurred to me there's probably more useful ways to spend your time than knife fighting suicide bombers. So I was like, I know Mike's going to be injured. I didn't know who he was at this point. I just knew he was a U.S. soldier. But I know he's going to be injured. So I ran over and grabbed him and attempted to tried to grab him by his collar, but he had a stretchy shirt on, so I just pulled it off, and it was just stretching way out. So I was shit, I'll figure this out another way. And I reached down and I grabbed him by the belt buckle and kind of just picked him up and shuffled him into this UAV compound and started treatment on him. And he was in a bad way. I had an IFAC, and what he really needed was a hospital. And lucky for him, we're on a FOB, and I can see the hospital from here. So I grabbed a contractor for the UAV compound. He's sitting back there, hanging out next to a generator. And they had a little Suzuki Mule, and he got it fired up. We loaded Mike up and got him got him to the hospital pretty quick after he was wounded. Unfortunately, he did succumb to his injuries and died that day in Ghazni. And now I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do because I'm alone again because my friends keep running off and abandoning me, and I sent away the only friend I had, this contractor. But in the Q course, in the weapons side, to become a weapons sergeant, they have light weapons, and it's the annoying part. You're taking these guns apart, putting them back together, and it's a high stress thing, and they have all these. You're going to be on the battlefield and have to assemble a gun at night covered in honey. And I'm like, I don't think so. I'm a combat veteran. This has never come up. So I hate this part of the story. But I went and grabbed an AK, and it had a really nice 30 caliber hole through the bolt, and the operating rod is like shattered off of it. So they don't work like that, even as reliable as AKs are. And I throw it down, I grab another one, and it's got 9mm rounds through the top of the magazine, but it has blown the magazine out, which has stretched the receiver apart, and they don't work like that either. But I was like, well, this one's got a good bolt. So I stripped that one out, go back and put an AK together, and got it. I start grabbing magazines and grenades and trying to figure out what I'm going to do. And the incoming commander, we had a change of command that day, runs up, and he's like, Earl, what the hell are you doing? And, I kind of tell him about my day and try to get him involved with my plan to run off base and attack this base of fire. And he's like, well, the Poles have tanks here. We'll probably just let them do that. Let's go back to the camp. And he, takes me back to the AOB. And, that was the end of my day.
So at this point, after all that, you're ready to go off the base and go attack the base of fire at the other facility.
Yeah, well, there were Taliban out there.
But in the process, validated the Q course. I mean, you weren't covered in honey, but
yeah, I'm like, yep. So if you're in the Q course right now, maybe one time you might have to put guns together in combat on the battlefield. I'm sorry.
It's interesting because as you're going through, I hear you referencing training, Q course, prior experiences. How much of your training kicked in without you really having to think about it as this happened?
All of it. So every instance, the actions, I didn't take actions. I executed rehearsed activities that had been trained into me relentlessly. So I didn't decide to pull my pistol out because my rifle jammed. Like it was a auto reflex. As soon as the rifle didn't recoil properly, it registered that the rifle was down, and then by the time I really cognitively figured that out, my pistol was already out. When I had to reload, that process started because I'd trained so much that when I felt that bolt lock to the rear, there was already a magazine coming, and the old one needed to be out of the way because they're passing each other in the sky. So which really, I always tell people the only thing I'll own is the will to engage with the enemy. All the success that I enjoyed on that battle was for the training I'd received, and good training that was well thought out, and being in an organization that won't leave well enough alone. I had peers that were like, well, you didn't really do that great. It was executed kind of poorly. You should do that one again. And being humble enough to listen to guys tell me that I wasn't the best, and to become the best. But yeah, obviously everything I had executed on that battlefield was something I had trained at before many times.
So your responses were automatic, at least at a technique level. Those responses had become automatic for you.
Absolutely, yeah. I didn't have to. I could concentrate on other things because I didn't have to come up with what to do. My body was just reacting to that.
Do you think that facilitated you not being overcome by the events?
Yeah. I mean, if I had to figure out that my rifle's jammed and I need to pull my pistol out, if I had to think through why I don't have ammunition in my rifle currently, I think that not having those ready-made solutions, kind of providing me a tool to use against the enemy, obviously, held my psyche together.
Well, I'm going to guess also that as I mean, you obviously, but you were exposed to multiple blasts, right? I mean, your sequence of explosions. At some point, I'm going to guess that you're no longer, able to do advanced mathematics.
Yeah,
as you're moving.
You can, if you notice that the person that decided to stand next to the grenade so they didn't have to run somewhere, that is not a brilliant mind.
Eye protection. He was wearing eye protection. Oh,
right.
Wait, no, he turned his head. Never mind.
And I can, through the battle, when I start the battle, very clear, and I can remember seeing, further off into the camp, and then, as the battle progresses, my little circle of cognitive recall, it gets closer and closer and closer. To the point when Drew and I were getting grenaded at a certain point, I remember I know that I was engaging something, right? But in my memory, all I can kind of see is the rear of my rifle, the red dot, and the brass. I have a astounding memory of the brass coming out of the rifle. I can't remember what was in front of me at all. And that's where I can kind of tell how much stress I was under through the battle is kind of how far away I could see, which I recognize because it's an evaluation of how competent you are for free fall. Is the instructor first thing on the ground? He's like, "What did you see?" And if you saw nothing, that's bad because that means you were really in your own head. When guys get a few jumps, they remember their altimeter, which is about 8 inches from their face. So you'll see guys have a very good, the whole jump, they just remember the dials spinning on that altimeter. And then when somebody's really competent in the air, they'll remember, well, I saw the instructor, and then there was a mountain and a lake off to to your rear. And that's, as you kind of get inoculated to stress and fear, you'll start taking in those details. So that's kind of, I know I was kind of maxed out for what stress and fear I could kind of deal with, because at that point I couldn't see past the rear aperture of my rifle.
One of the things that you touched on was you felt like the training had come from people that were being honest with you and saying, "Hey, you're not performing very well here." I'm guessing in a training environment when you were getting that feedback. I would imagine that there's a lot of really cool things to break down there. That you have the organizational culture at that point, that somebody is willing to be able to say that. And then you touched on, too, the humility to be able to accept that, and then that drive to be able to continue to train and build those repetitions, and then you saw it play out. So oftentimes when we talk about accountability, when we talk about standards, those are just kind of words that people use. Oftentimes it's used with supervision, or I'm going to hold somebody accountable, right? But we're talking about some line level, lateral accountability truly with your team, and being able to say, "Hey, you're not performing well here. You need to work on this." And I could see a lot of people shutting down, and nobody wants to work on the things that they're not good at.
Yeah, it's not comfortable to embrace weakness.
Right.
I would rather obviously go out and just nail the things I'm really good at. So to take stock and look in the mirror and be like, well, I'm gonna throw myself on the altar of humble pie and go and fail at this until I'm good at it is a hard thing to do. And I think, SF has a good culture where like people will respect that and, kind of honor your well, at least you're out here.
Yeah. And that's great to be able to build that culture. And that's something that, organizationally, I would love to make sure that we're building that in each of our organizations. But I don't know that we always see that. Oftentimes you see, well, I'm not the sergeant. That's not my job. I don't want to be the one that goes and does this, but really being able to step up and do that, I thought was really interesting that you said that. Those are things that I'm keen on.
Yeah. We were talking earlier, and I guess, rehash my, a lot of people are like, wow, it's great. That's amazing that you did that. I couldn't do that. I'm like, well, let me tell you about Earl's first gunfight. And driving into a city at night in Iraq, and wasn't even that bad. Nobody was shooting at me, but they were shooting at things. And luckily, Browning makes a very sturdy gun, because I was trying to pull that thing off the truck, and get sitting so low in the truck that I couldn't see anything. If I'd had to react, there's no doubt in my mind I would not have. I was wanting to be anywhere else, but then that gun truck, and but I had some really good leaders, and I think that, are noticing that I was kind of down here thinking about myself, wishing I'd gone to law school, and just giving me like small tasks to get me outside of my own head, and not important tasks, but asking me if I had my flares ready for escalation of force, asking me if the truck behind us was still there, and I'm like forcing me to kind of get out and participate in the battle, not in a meaningful way, but in a way that just kind of kept me engaged. Yeah. And then once you'll get comfortable with anything if you're there long enough. So once I realized that I wasn't going to die immediately, I started coming up out of my little turtle shell, and luckily that was a pretty one-sided fight. By the time we kind of got there, it was all over, and I never really got engaged. But I'm like, that was my first gunfight. I was, if I hadn't been strapped into the truck, I was definitely ready to run somewhere else.
What do you think? So from that Earl to Medal of Honor Earl, what happens there? What changes in you?
So every, and I also, I got really lucky in that I had a very, low escalation of violence. So, gunfights that were overwhelming on my side, very little return fire, and then gradually they got worse and worse, and as I went through. But each time, I started getting confidence. It's one thing to you train martial arts your whole life. If you've never actually fought somebody, you don't really know. And to kind of see my training function on the battlefield, and to after you've survived a few gunfights, and then you're like, the reason that we were successful is these things that we had practice and training, and it validated the training. I'm like, I just have this confidence that I'm ready for anything, and I think after Ghazni, I've never been like stand alone in the face of the enemy before, but there's a very common nightmare that combat veterans have, and there's I've had both of them, or I used to have both of them. And one, the bad guys, you shoot them and they don't die.
They don't go down.
Yeah, they don't go down.
The Michael Myers nightmare.
Yeah, or they fall down and they get right back up, and you're on the battlefield and you're shooting these guys and they don't die and they keep coming, and then eventually you're overrun. And then the other one is being on the battlefield without ammunition. Yeah, or no gun. Yeah, right.
So you played out both of those.
So I played out both of those, but I've never had that nightmare again after that day.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Cops have the same thing, right? About shooting and running out of ammunition and not being there. And when you're telling this story, we were fortunate to be able to hear you present it a little earlier and hearing it again today. That's what all I kept thinking is, man, you are playing out everybody's
worst nightmare. Man. Yeah, it's the old going to school without pants thing.
You did that too.
I did that.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. But
we're not talking about that.
Yeah, we're keep this on combat and training. But no, that's it's a very, very common thing. And then after that day, I went and looked at what would I have done different. I could have come better prepared. I could have bought a different rifle if I could see the future. I wished I'd had my gun belt on, but I habitually for the labor I was doing, a gun belt does not help with manual labor. I did the best I could with how I would have come, and when I really looked in the mirror, I was like, I wouldn't really have changed anything. I still think the fight I anticipated, having to shoot way off the camp, or being asked to support another team, the sniper rifle kind of lended itself to like being that thing, and then surviving that battle. And I would say strictly off of the training and then the tactics that I've been taught, gave me like a really high level of confidence.
Is there anything that, and maybe this is too strong of a word, and I certainly mean no disrespect to it, but the word that comes to mind is in the weeks leading up to the assault, would you term as complacency of getting used to the assaults that were coming daily, and then you could set your watch by how often they were coming? And is there anything that you even would have been able to do offensively to be able to impact that?
So, we looked back at that. What could we have done different? So the AOR that we were in was not ours. So we were staged there just for logistical reasons. So we had no right, if we had found out that these guys are doing this at camp attack, U.S. Special Forces would have had no right to go out and prosecute this. And nor would we ever waste any of our time trying to solve that mystery because we have a coalition partner, the Poles, that's theirs. And then, we had some intelligence indicators that painted the picture that they were also solving. So they had their picture. They knew that the camp was going to be attacked that day. They didn't know it was going to be a spectacular attack. They sent a 2-man sniper team to the hotel to what they thought stop a team from emplacing either a recoilless rifle or a rocket or some sort. And that was their big plan because they had kind of picked up some intelligence that there would be an attack. Obviously, they underestimated it vastly. And on the other hand, we knew that somewhere in that quarter of Afghanistan, there was going to be a spectacular FOB attack because we could see them sucking up all this support to support it. Like a 20,000-pound bomb and then 2 5,000-pound bombs. That's a vast amount of explosives. So we could see them gathering this stuff up, the munitions that they were moving around. We knew there was going to be a spectacular attempt. And I guess if we'd ever sat down and just disregarded the other work we'd been given, we might have figured that out. But we had no cause to do it. We were doing our job in our areas of Afghanistan, and they were running theirs. And I think it's just one of those. The battlefields are messy, and the enemy gets a chance to kill you. You can mitigate it as best as you want, but at the end of the day, they get a vote in how the battles go.
Yeah, it's like a suspect gets a vote.
Yeah. So from a lessons learned standpoint and things that you think are actionable for other units, looking back at this, you talk about stress inoculation. Mm-hmm. How would you now, on the heels of this, explain to other people building stress inoculation, and how did this event change the way that you viewed that?
So I had always been trained in a manner that was stressful, and that's different. As you get older and more competent, the stress is different. So as a young private, it just takes a sergeant yelling at him, and that's stressful. That causes a ton of problems for him. And then for like my operators, the closest thing I can get is to like physically fatigue them. It's very common before we do a stress shoot, have a guy run a mile in his gear. And then I also like pepper spray and tasers, because even if somebody thinks that there's a chance that they're going to get tased, you'll see them act in a very different manner, especially if they've been tased once before.
So you'll unexpectedly tase them?
Well, I'll tell them that, hey, we're doing training today and somebody's getting tased.
Could be you, could be somebody else.
Whoever shoots the lowest score gets tased today. That's always a fun one. But it's one of those things. I find that when somebody's physically exhausted, like to the point of like muscle failure, that closely mimics their combat performance. Because in combat, different processes are taking place, but a lot of them, the racing heart from all the adrenaline's in your system, the fear, and just the preponderance of emotions that are coming in. You get the same physical performance from just like running a guy ragged. That's how good he is. So if you think on any given day at 50 meters, I'm very competent with a pistol. I can just beat a 10 ring to death. But somebody stands down there with one bullet and they're going to shoot it back. Like, that's a tough shot for me. I'm a high level performer. So you think, and you look at statistics, they kind of bleed that out, that these gunfights will happen inside of 10 feet, and two guys will wail away at each other and shoot 7-8 rounds, and there's one hit, and they weren't very good in the first place. And then once those eyes dilate, keeping the front sight post clear is nearly impossible. And and the best you can do is kind of hope for that process to line up once. And you look at I think people like Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, very fascinating characters, because they weren't exceptionally fast gunfighters, and they weren't exceptionally well known for their competency with a firearm. But what they did possess was either, very probably sociopaths. They just didn't get rattled, and they would, hold the gun out, use the front sight post, and line up a shot and take it. And you have to be able to get out of your own head, kind of master your body, and apply the fundamentals like your life depended on it, because for this story it does, and make those hits. And for training, if you're not completely stressed out in one manner or the other, you're not really training.
You're just practicing.
You're just practicing. You're not training for an actual scenario. You're just you're out farting around a little bit.
It's interesting because you talk about two complementary things. One is absolutely fundamentally drilling the basics, right? And being able to execute those basics under a high stress situation. The other thing that you're talking about is the culture of the unit that is accountability to one another and to the unit itself, to constantly attack your weaknesses and to create a culture of driving towards perfection. It strikes me that those two kind of came together for you.
And I, even as a force recon Marine, that was the same culture. Actually, probably more rabid. That place is very aggressive with it, and to be there, have your peers demand perfection of you, and then to have relevant, well thought out training, and then to be a professional yourself. I mean, you can't help but end up with something pretty special at the end of that.
It seems though that it's very easy to decide that you've mastered the basics, and it's very easy to avoid uncomfortability in interpersonal relationships because, I know Earl isn't practicing this, but I don't want to have the awkward conversation. How do you prevent that from occurring in a unit?
I think, it's always going to be uncomfortable at first, and then it's the manner that it's delivered. And you can tell, if somebody's picking at you in a malicious manner, that's how it comes off. But if somebody is being humble and hey, the stopwatch doesn't lie, the target doesn't lie, you're not doing well. And I think I know what's wrong. Maybe they're trying to help you. Maybe they can't. If it's a peer, a lot of times they're like, I can do this, but I'm not there where I can teach you. I'm just telling you, you're not there. So be back here tomorrow. And then, something that always kept me humble also is, right after I became a Force Recon Marine, being qualified as an 0321, coming from the infantry, huge deal. I got airborne wings. I've been to SEER school, and I walk in, and my first team sergeant, Pat Sterling, he sat me down. The whole team's gone, and he's lauding my accomplishments. And he's like, you graduated ARS. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, SEER and jump school, it's a big deal. And I was like, my head's this big, and he's like, that's the bare minimum to even walk through that door. It's like, you are the bare minimum I will even accept that comes in here and drinks water in my presence. So so now, what are you going to do? Why should I keep you? And for me, that was man, he took the wind right out of my sails. And I was like, yeah, why am I going to be here? And that I was like, okay, so I'm not special anymore. I was special before I walked in this door, and now I have to hold myself to a higher standard. And I'm looking at the unit to see what guys are good at that I'm not, and it's everything. And I just rapidly attack that. And I think that conversation kind of stopped me, because it's a two-way street. You need somebody to be bold enough to tell you you're not meeting the standard, and then you got to be humble enough to take that. And don't take it as a personal attack. You're not good. Get good.
It's interesting that one of the things that you said is that you talked about stopwatches and scores and things that are objectively measurable. Do you think it's essential that you are driving objective standards that then, because if I say, well, I don't like the way you sing, that's a difficult thing. No. It's very subjective. But if I go, hey, it took you 45 seconds, it's supposed to take you 15.
That's an easy one, because if you don't know that, you're not trying very hard. But there's other things, especially for how you're giving commands to a room. Especially the job we have, they have the sleepovers, you'll go into a room and sometimes it'll be empty and sometimes there'll be, 30, 40 guys in there. And we're like, okay, rehearsing these commands. And you're like, hey, that's not intimidating. I don't feel like you're owning the room. I think the way you're delivering it, I feel like is inviting violence. And then you got the other guy that's like, way over the top. And I'm like, hey, you're screaming like a maniac. That's almost as bad as this weakness. You're kind of adding a like stress to the room. Like, we don't need them panicking that we're going to murder them all. We want them to understand that we are in command of this situation competently, and that's like, have that conversation. How you're standing, like you look scared. Like, that's not, like, I didn't feel intimidated. I felt like you were intimidated. And, and most of the time people's body language is, they're like, well, I was intimidated. It was terrifying. But like, okay, well, don't stand like that, stand, like this is how you were looking, and subjective things, like that. Like, and I can tell, like, when somebody's emplacing an explosive, how competent they are. They can lie to me. They can even, like, yep, I nailed it. It went off, but, like, you're sitting there messing with it, and your hands are doing the like, I don't know what to do with my hand stuff. And I'm like, you need to rehearse this more, because obviously you got it right this one time, but I know, and that you were nervous, like, to a huge extent. Like, let's go practice that until you're not nervous. And I mean, you can lie about it, like, well, it's because it was cold, that's why, and I'm like, well, maybe you're the only one that knows, but that looked dumb to me.
So it's just a constant drive towards excellence in everything. In everything,
yeah. Why, I don't think anybody wants to write a book about how I did pretty good at some stuff, and nobody's going to read that. Like, Tiger Woods gets to write a book. He nailed it. So why wouldn't you want to master these things? And especially, in the military and law enforcement community, like, not only does your own life hang in the balance, somebody else's life hangs in the balance. And that was always been my kind of thing. My before you go off the battlefield, you could get killed. That's bad. But if you get somebody killed, especially somebody you care about because you didn't want to train hard, and you got to carry that forever. And I've seen that eat at people, either because it's true or because they think it's true. So, I also decided that at the end of the day, when I go to bed at night, I'm going to go to bed fine, because when my friends do get killed, I know that there was nothing else I could have done. I gave everything on the battlefield. I gave everything in training, and this is the profession we're in, and that's just what happens. And if you can't say that, you're just putting yourself up for one bad event to ruin two lives.
So initially you were given a Silver Star, which was then upgraded to the Congressional Medal of Honor, which is obviously the highest honor that our nation bestows upon warriors. What does the Medal of Honor mean to you?
I haven't really figured that out yet. I've always admired Medal of Honor recipients. I've read their stories my entire career, even before I joined the military. I've always been just profoundly interested in, like, those types of men. Like, this situation was so bad, and then he rose to this occasion. It's just always fascinated me. So to be honored with it myself, I don't know what it means to me. I think for me, obviously, to be honored by the nation was a profound thing. But I think what really affected me the most was my peers. When men like Tony Bell and Mark Colbert are giving me accolades and telling me that I exceeded the standard, and those are guys I always drove to myself to emulate, to be half as good of, and to have them there when it happened, clapping and at me was huge. You're having your heroes worship you is a huge paradigm shift that's very uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's interesting that interacting with so many warriors throughout my career, it's always interesting to me how the people that receive the highest honors are usually so humble about it, and often find themselves wondering, why me or why not somebody else. It's almost like it takes that humility to reach the level that you were able to reach.
Yeah, I think probably. Yeah. But it's hard not to be humble when I wasn't the best gunfighter that was there. I was the best gunfighter that didn't get shot in the first 5 seconds of the battle. So like for me to like, I was the only person that could have accomplished those tasks is not true. Drew and Mark Colbert were, equally proficient at those things. It's like the only reason that I was able to be, receive those accolades is because I didn't get shot right away. They did. And no doubt in my mind that if those had been reversed, if I'd gotten hit right away, Drew would have stepped in and filled that breach, or Chief would have shaken that off and been the guy, and to receive that award. I know that's true.
But I think also you had to be able to rise to the occasion, and you were.
Yep. Well, sync to a high level of training. I didn't rise to the occasion. I luckily I had a high bar set for me that I grasped onto, and as everything was kind of falling apart, like I had a really strong foundation, better than theirs. I love telling soldiers, you're not as good as me, but your training is the best and it's relevant. So if you have to go on the battlefield, go on with your head up high and that confidence that you are going to be the best man on the battlefield. I think that's a unique thing that we get to say as Americans, that whatever room I am, I'm probably the best at this thing.
One of the things, Earl, outside of everything that we've talked about today in doing research and reading about you, is one of the things that was that I saw included in your bio was that you put a lot in there about your family. And my perspective is that of all the great things that you have done professionally, and some of the great things that you bring to the table humility-wise, I really liked reading things that spliced into your professional accomplishments in your career. You outlined, this is when I met my wife. This is where she's from. This is when we got married. This is when my daughter was born. This is when my son was born. And seeing those things in there, I really appreciated that about you. I would imagine, never having served, I don't know this for a fact, but I do see a lot of similarities in the people that I know from the military community as well as in the law enforcement community. And there's a lot of guys who really get it right professionally. There's a lot of guys who might get it right personally, and there's not a lot of guys that can build both in there. And John and I have a mutual friend in Sid Hale, and I touched on him this morning, and some of the things that he taught me about where some of those things line up for both is really something that's changed my life. It's driven me to be a better person. So I don't know you personally in that regard, but I thought it was unique. I read a lot of people's bios and the things that I hadn't seen a whole lot of people that bring that in there. So I thought that was really cool to be able to see that and to see how you interact a little bit in that regard is something that's really great too, and something that's worth mentioning for the people who will end up listening to this and being able to find that balance away from your professional life. And you touched on it too with your language school and picking out where is it that your wife wanted to live, and this is what you're going to do, and being able to keep that balance together, man. So I think that's really, really cool to see. Just an observation.
No, I think it's true. And I always, we don't recruit young men. We recruit mothers of young men, because that's who has the say. Like, I think about joining the Army. If the mom's not convinced it's a good idea, they're not coming. And then, by keeping a guy, like, most of the time he wants to stay. If his wife doesn't think it's worth it, or if she feels like the paradigm is way out of whack, where the work is not of value enough to explain why he's not home, you're going to lose that guy. And and I've taken my wife right to the edge several times. She's not shy, so she's like, hey, this is, like, I signed up for adversity, but this is not it. And I have to go and find that work-life balance and turn it back a notch.
It's good. It's a good thing to learn. One last question. Winning the Medal of Honors probably had you go to a lot of different events and probably get to meet a lot of people. Who's the coolest person that you've met since you've won the award at going to some of these events? And
well, I don't know who's the coolest person.
Or maybe one of the most impressive, or that to you personally, one of the people that you enjoyed meeting the most. Maybe that's a better way of putting it.
I got to single one out, but especially growing up reading Medal of Honor narratives. When I went to the Medal of Honor convention, and I walked into the room, and I'm looking at like all the legends, from the Marine Corps, from the Army, from the Navy, Air Force, and you see all these guys that I've been reading about, and I'm in a room with them, and they're trying to buy me a beer. That was pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very unique club.
Yep, and I'm also the new guy in the club, so they were like,
so you have to buy the beer.
Yeah, they're like, hey, actually, there's this crappy stuff we have to do around here, and you're the guy that's in charge of it now. So I'm like, right back at the bottom of a population.
Building the humility, man.
Yeah.
Earl, on behalf of a nation that is grateful for the service you provided, thank you.
Pleasure.
It's very easy for us to forget these kinds of stories, and it's very easy for people that are not in this community to think, well, how bad can it be? And I think that events like this show us not only how bad it can be, but the amazing level that people can rise to. And as a country, we appreciate you.
Thank you.